Hey everybody, this is Dr. Chris Doss. Thanks so much for joining me today on my page, Biblical Languages and Literature. Before we get started, I want to let you know about some of the exciting course offerings in biblical languages and literature that are being offered through Sabra Global Education, like Dr. Steve Notley's course, Jesus' Parables as Jewish Scripture. This is a great course for those who have a desire to better understand the Jewishness of the New Testament, as well as Professor Gary Rensburg's class, Egypt and the Bible, the Book of Isaiah from Yesterday to Today, which is an ongoing weekly course with Rabbi Dr. Robert Harris of the Jewish Theological Seminary, as well as my own course, How to Read the Bible, Tools for Studying the Jewish and Christian Scriptures. This is an 8-session class that meets 1 hour per week, in which I teach tools and methods for studying the Jewish and Christian Scriptures, including history, culture, and yes, even a bit of language. We look at just the basic elements of Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic. And don't worry if you're intimidated by languages, we just deal with the elements so that the student can start to use more sophisticated print and electronic resources for studying the Bible. This course meets live from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, May 10th through June 28th. But it's okay if you can't make the live sessions, as each class is always recorded and uploaded to an online classroom. So be sure to register today. And if these courses might interest a group at your local church, synagogue, or learning group, Sabra offers significant group discounts. Contact info@sabraedu.com to find out more. All right, let's get to our video.
Lots of commentators, both medieval and modern, will treat chapter 1 as a hearkening back to earlier prophets, as well as a kind of addressing of the entire book of Isaiah. So the themes that we saw will be revisited in various times over and over and over again. And as well as the idea of Isaiah building his prophetic discourse on those who have preceded him, in particular Amos, is something that we'll see. So I wanted just to show you an example. So again, I always said my teacher, Rabbi Yochanan Mufs of blessed memory, used to say that Isaiah was like a disciple. He was like a Talmud of Amos. Amos was his Rebbe. He put it in rabbinic terms, although there weren't rabbis back then. So I just took one example. There were at least one or two more I could have chosen. But we saw this speech on the right. By the way, I don't want to tell you how long it took me to figure out how to put things in synoptic columns. It comes very naturally to Christians, of course, the idea of synoptic. No, just kidding. Trying to figure out my word processor. But at any rate, on the right, you see Isaiah. With a severe indictment, and I chose the verses that God had rejected the worship, the ritual worship that the Judeans were offering to him in the temple. Right? I've had enough of this with burnt offerings. I don't want you to do this because these things are offensive to me, presumably if you're not also behaving morally. And on the left, it's this famous speech of Amos. Again, think of it as, 30, 40 years earlier. And even if Amos, the entirety of his prophecy was a single day, it's possible that everything that we have is from a single day. It was kicked out, but his writings were preserved, among others, for people like Isaiah, as well as the generations later. And he says, I loathe, I spurn your festivals. I'm not appeased by your psalm. If you offer me these things, I will not accept them. And then, of course, we remember this from Dr. Martin Luther King, may his memory be a blessing. But let justice well up like water, righteousness like an unfailing stream. So that we see right there, in rabbinic language, I say that's the ikar. That is the essence. And we're going to see all sorts of variations. If you get bored, oh my God, Johnny, one note, get ready, because the prophets think that they can't speak it enough. And obviously, through these thousands of years since those speeches, we can't hear it enough. We need to hear these messages and the reminders that we need to do better in this world. And justice and righteousness are more important than worship. right? But the point is here that justice is the most important thing, and tzedek mishpat, right? There's just nothing more important than that. Now you could say, well, Samuel said that to Saul back in the very beginning of the monarchy. It's better to listen to God than to offer up the fatlings of bleeding beasts, right? Back there, I think in 1 Samuel 15, if you're scoring at home. That is something that is just one of the great themes of Scripture. We can appreciate, the interaction among the prophets and the influence even better. So Amos and Hosea prophesying in the north while the northern kingdom still stood, clearly among the first of the famous literary, rhetorical prophets, prophets whose works they don't appear as characters in stories. They appear mostly as speakers or composers of prophetic, indictments and messages. So that they come first, Isaiah, the 8th century Isaiah, and Micah, roughly contemporaries in Judah, in the south, emulating that which the previous generation had spoken in the north. Jeremiah comes afterwards with a few that are around him, and Ezekiel. Then there are 3 more that are in the Second Temple, and we're not going to concern ourselves with them right now until we get to Isaiah 66. We're now in chapter 2, and as you see right away, it sounds like it's the beginning of a book, right? Because we have a superscription, and typically superscriptions in the prophetic works indicate the beginning of something. Now, in this case, you could find different superscriptions here and there. Obviously, the individual Psalms all have them, almost all of them. And here and there in the prophets, you'll see something, that looks like the beginning of a compositional unit. But it's a little bit suspicious that we have right after the beginning, 1:1. Now we have another one, 2:1. Now, it's noteworthy more than suspicious, I should say, but there's some sort of beginning of a discourse unit. And note right away, what is the nature of this transmission? And this is among the most famous prophetic statements. You'll see why as soon as we get to it. You right away, applying the principle of muffs when he had us, this one held the Greek, this one held the Latin, this one had this Aramaic, this one had this English, whatever they had. He liked to have lots of translations going on in the room. And he said, where they essentially say the same thing, you say hill, this one says mountain, or the reverse, I'm not going to worry about it too much. But here's one word that stood out that was utterly different from your translation. We have here, the nation shall gaze on it with joy, and you shall stream to it. So this is one of the most famous early questions in this piece of prophetic literature. What is being prophesied here? Now, the Hebrew is naharu, right? Naharu. So if you think of it as nahar, a river, then stream to it. The long and the short of it is, you'll see here, it's gaze. So the question is, what is the prophet saying? So I think Professor Ginsburg said, gaze is a better interpretation, rooting it not in the typical Hebrew word nahar, meaning river, because we don't often see it as a verb, but a verb that we often see in Aramaic or later biblical Hebrew, nahar, to see. So that's why he translated as to gaze. But the essence here, whether or not they're gazing on it or they're streaming to it, what is the center of our focus here? The Lord's house there, the Lord's house. Now, to understand what the Lord's house is, what we call in English, the temple, in the biblical construction of the idea, and we'll see it explicitly in Isaiah chapter 6, is that God's own divine self, is thought of as residing somewhere up yonder in heaven in a temple, right? A temple that God built, right? And we have references to that in Exodus 15 and elsewhere, that God built God's self a palace, and the palace we have down here, whether the mini one in the end of the book of Exodus and in Leviticus, the portable sanctuary, also based on a blueprint that was up there in heaven that Moses and Bezalel were shown. Right, this is kasher hor'et bahar, as you were shown on the mountain. You saw blueprints. You built something down here that resembled up there. Is that we are building, or we have built, depending on where you're looking in the Bible, a house for God, or a home for God to indwell.
To learn more about this course or any of Sabra Global Education's Bible and theology courses, click the link in the description below or contact us at info@sabraedu.com, info@sabraedu.com. And don't forget to ask about our special group rates.